Richard stared at this blinking cursor on his laptop early that Monday morning. Outside, the sunrise bathed the window in a soft glow, and the rest of his apartment still felt like it was shaking off its weekend slumber. He'd just brushed his hair, naturally thick and a little unruly, and smoothed it down to lie tidily around his ears. Despite the languid, peaceful start to the day, his mind buzzed with anticipation. The entire department was scheduled for a major video conference in a couple of hours, the kind that shaped projects and deadlines for the next quarter. He'd been working from home ever since the company downsized their office footprint. Much of the staff worked remotely now. That shift had given him countless hours of privacy. He had his normal routine: fix a cup of coffee, check emails, and schedule out tasks for the day. But over the last several months, he had also allowed himself an indulgence. Whenever he had a spare moment in the early hours, he experimented with wearing clothes not typically associated with his public life. He'd kept this habit private for a long time, never once letting it slip into professional calls or interactions. The entire concept thrilled him. It also made him anxious, because any tiny mishap could reveal more about him than he wanted people to see. He worried they wouldn't understand. That Monday, in the hour or so before the team call, he wore a new floral dress he'd ordered online. The dress was light, airy, and had a pattern of small flowers that trailed down from the collar to the hem. He'd also donned a brown wig that reached just past his shoulders. The wig, combined with the dress, allowed him the comfort of experimentation without drastically changing his everyday appearance. He'd sometimes glance at himself in the mirror, a slight thrill lighting his eyes. Then he'd turn back to the screen to finalize a department workflow chart. The clock on his laptop read 8:15 a.m. The crucial call was set for 8:30 a.m., so he had only 15 minutes to switch from one persona to the next. He began feeling the familiar rush in his chest. Slowly, methodically, he slipped out of the floral dress. He draped it carefully on the arm of the couch behind him for a moment, while rummaging for the plain work shirt he usually wore on calls. His heart pounded. There was only so much time left. He could see chat notifications already popping up from Harriet, a longtime colleague who was reminding everyone to log on early to test their audio. He pulled on his standard professional attire, a sensible button-up and decent trousers. Next came that final flourish of double-checking the hair. With a shaky breath, he removed the wig. He set it atop the dress, meaning to return it to the closet right afterward. His Rachel persona, as he joked in his head, needed to be tucked away before the whole department got to see anything that belonged in his private life. Most days, he meticulously stored the clothes out of camera view in a trunk behind a divider. But that morning, he was behind schedule. He always prided himself on punctuality, so the moment Harriet's second message flashed, "We're starting in 5 minutes, folks," he hurriedly minimized the screens he had open. In his rush, he forgot to close the extra camera feed on his computer. This secondary camera was something he'd originally used to record short creative clips for friends, or sometimes to capture comedic videos in a different persona. Lately, it had also served as his personal vanity cam whenever he tried on new outfits. He'd started using a separate app so he could adjust angles and test poses without messing with his main video settings for professional calls. Within a minute, Richard was fully dressed in his usual office shirt, hair roughly combed back. Then, as time ticked dangerously close to 8:30, he joined the scheduled video conference. The screen showed the grid of coworkers. Some faces were still popping up as they connected audio. Harriet was front and center, wearing large headphones that made her look like a helicopter pilot. Max, a systems analyst, was sipping coffee from a mug bigger than his face. Jasmine, the new marketing specialist, was fussing with her microphone input. People exchanged the usual greetings. "Morning, Harriet." "Morning, folks." "Can everyone see me? I can't see you." The standard scramble that every remote meeting seemed to bring. "Richard, you're here," Harriet said brightly, scanning the participants. "Great. I believe Tom's going to be a little late, but we can start with introductions in a minute. We're waiting for Reggie from the finance team to hop on." Richard felt a subtle wave of relief. So far, so good. He adjusted his seating, eyed the digital background he'd set up, a generic corporate wallpaper that smoothed out the edges of his real living room behind him, and prepared to share his screen when it would be his turn. His main job on this call was to present new project guidelines. He took a breath, clicked around to ready his slides, and then froze. On the conference interface, he noticed a faint pop-up in the corner. "Warning, secondary camera is in use." His pulse spiked. Usually that app warning only appeared if he opened the program that ran the vanity cam. He was about to dismiss it when Harriet's voice drew his focus. They were starting the meeting in earnest. "Before we dive into the budget updates," Harriet announced, "Richard has a short presentation about the workflow process we'll be rolling out this quarter. Richard, do you have it ready?" He forced a smile into his webcam. "Yes, just give me one moment to set up the screen share." He toggled to the slides. The entire time, his mind screamed that something was amiss. The main interface for his secondary camera must still be open. But maybe that wasn't an immediate crisis, he told himself. That camera was on a separate feed, not connected to the official conferencing software, or so he hoped. "Whenever you're ready," Harriet reiterated. Richard started to speak. "Thank you, Harriet. Good morning, everyone." His voice quavered on that first line, though he tried to steady it. "I'm excited to walk you through the updated process flows. We think this will help streamline tasks across the remote teams, especially for marketing, finance, and design." He clicked to the first slide. It was an overview of departmental responsibilities. The corners of the screen filled with small nodding heads in the video gallery. Everyone seemed attentive. Harriet typed notes, and Max leaned closer to the camera with his coffee mug. For about 30 seconds, Richard's explanation flowed smoothly. Then he noticed the private chat message bubble up. He tried to ignore it at first, but more pings kept coming. Harriet, typically a gracious coworker, rarely interrupted mid-presentation. Yet, there it was, a chat from Harriet. "Hey, check your background feed?" He paused in mid-sentence, hoping no one would notice the shift in his eyes as he read. Another chat came from Max. "Dude, behind you?" Richard didn't dare open the full chat window while he was screen sharing. Summoning every ounce of calm, he pressed on. He clicked to the second slide, swallowing the mounting panic. He tried to keep his voice level as he described the next bullet points. Meanwhile, a series of new chat notifications danced at the edge of his vision. His heart hammered so loudly he almost couldn't hear himself speak. The message from Harriet repeated, "Check your background feed. Something's displayed behind you. You can see it in the small corner window. Hurry." He finally glanced at his own tiny video preview in the corner of the conference call. At first, it showed his standard corporate wallpaper background. But then, flickering in the top right corner, he glimpsed another miniature feed that wasn't the usual still shot. It seemed his screen share was occasionally catching glimpses of that second feed. And in that second feed, the distinct image of a floral dress lying across the arm of his couch, next to a brown wig. Richard's stomach dropped. He realized that he must have left that Vanity Cam app running in the background, and somehow it was layering or mixing with the main conference software. The feed was small, but not so small that people couldn't identify the wig and dress. It looked so obviously out of place next to him, a bright swirl of pastel fabric and artificial hair, and that vantage point had to be capturing exactly where he'd flung them. He abruptly fumbled for the stop screen share button, but Harriet urged him aloud to keep the slides up. She had no idea how distracting this was for him. Or rather, she did, but she also wanted the presentation. She typed a direct message that slid across the screen. "We can see the wig and the dress. Turn off the second feed or reposition the camera, quick! His voice caught. He coughed into his elbow, searching for an excuse. Sorry, let me switch to a different screen share. Something weird is going on with my system. His eyes darted away from the camera as he tried, in a hurried scramble, to open the settings panel of the conferencing software. He was praying for a way to kill the second feed altogether, but the fumbling only made it worse. Suddenly, as he toggled, the entire call displayed a new combined feed. Everyone could see his slides on the left, but on the right side, a small window popped open. There, in crisp resolution, lay the floral dress, half crumpled, with the wig draped over it. A hush fell across the call. Someone stifled a giggle. Another coworker coughed. Harriet cleared her throat in what sounded like second-hand embarrassment. He slammed his trackpad to close that window, but it took several tries because every misclick brought up a new menu. The entire fiasco played out in a matter of seconds. Yet to Richard, it felt like time slowed. He was sure that each moment etched itself into permanent memory for all present. Finally, with a desperate stab at the correct option, he shut down the second feed and cut off the video share. The screen returned to Harriet's face. She looked more than a little flustered. "Richard," she said quietly, though her microphone was picking up every word. "We can continue with the slides. Just, handle anything that might be interfering in the background. Then we can come back to you when you're ready." Every single participant had that same politely stunned expression. Even the new intern in the corner feed looked wide-eyed, as though they'd just witnessed something they shouldn't have. Richard stared, a flush creeping from his neck upward. He mumbled into the microphone, "Sorry about that. Technical glitch. Let me fix it, and I'll be right back." He turned off his camera feed completely, but left the call open with the audio on mute. Then, practically leaping from his chair, he rushed over and snatched up the wig and dress. He shoved them both into a drawer. Half of him wanted to sink through the floor. The other half was already trying to figure out how on earth he could spin this. Could he say they were just items for Halloween, months out of season? Could he say they belonged to a roommate? That was impossible, because he lived alone. He could claim they were his wife's, except he wasn't married. These were the frantic calculations darting through his mind as he paced the living room. After a few seconds of pacing, he forced himself to rejoin the call. He switched the camera back on. Everyone stared at him, maybe not as openly as they would have if they were in a physical room, but the tension was palpable. Harriet tried to break the ice. "Welcome back, Richard. All good now?" He nodded, forced a grin. "Yes, sorry about that. I had a second camera running from, a project I'm working on." He let out a weak chuckle, aware it sounded unnatural. "Just a personal side project, testing some comedic stuff for, a friend's online show. The dress and wig are, well, let's call them theater props." For the next few seconds, silence reigned. Then Harriet gave a polite nod. Sure, no worries. We all have weird stuff at home, right?" She tried to diffuse the awkwardness. "Anyway, once you're set, we can have you share your workflow slides again." Behind Harriet, Max took a noisy slurp of coffee. He had that bemused expression, likely wanting to bury himself in laughter, but too polite, or too shocked, to let it out in front of Harriet. Jasmine was half smiling, staring off to the side as if she needed to keep herself from giggling. Another coworker typed something, presumably in private chat, because Harriet's eyebrows shot up for a moment. Richard dreaded imagining what they were all saying. Trying to salvage the meeting, he launched back into the slides with a trembling voice. The rest of the presentation from that point on was a blur. He rattled off bullet points about how tasks would be delegated, the deadlines for each department, and the new software integration schedule. All the while, he could see sideways glances on screen. People typed furiously in the chat, sending messages he could only guess at. When he finally wrapped up, Harriet gave him a gracious, "Thank you, Richard," and seamlessly transitioned to Reggie from finance. The rest of the meeting continued for another 20 minutes, but Richard barely registered any of it. His mind was consumed with panic. Each tick of the clock made him wonder how he'd explain it if asked later. Should he own up to the truth, or stick with some story about theatrical props? By the time Harriet ended the call, "That's it for this morning, everyone. Thanks for your time," Richard felt dizzy. He clicked "Leave meeting," slid his laptop aside, and dropped his head into his hands. A knot of mortification coiled in his stomach, hot and tight. This was not some small slip that could be overlooked. People had definitely seen the wig and the dress. Over 30 employees from various departments now had that bizarre image seared into their memory. A few friendly co-workers might dismiss it as no big deal, but he suspected at least half would be gossiping by lunch. Sure enough, within minutes, Harriet's direct message chat popped up again. She simply wrote, "Hey, you okay? I'm sure it's not as bad as it feels right now. Can I call you?" Richard typed a fast reply. "Yeah, sure. Give me a sec." He stared at the typed words. His reflection hovered in the screen, a face tinged with embarrassment. The entire morning felt surreal. This was not how he wanted the day to go. Harriet's call came through, so he took a steadying breath and answered. She sounded gentle, as though speaking with a cornered animal. "Richard, I just wanted to check in. That was unexpected." He let out a tense laugh. "That's a word for it." "I'm not going to pry," Harriet continued, "but I wanted to say, I'll do my best to minimize chatter about it. I think the biggest confusion was that everyone saw a wig and a dress. Some folks might have leaped to conclusions." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Conclusions? Yes. Look, like I said, it's for a project. I had a comedic segment I was filming. I left that camera on by accident." Even as he said the words, the explanation sounded hollow. He pushed forward. "I appreciate you trying to keep gossip under wraps." Harriet offered a small laugh. "We all have personal stuff. I get it. Anyway, if anyone asks me directly, I'll just say it's a silly side project. But brace yourself. Some folks might tease you a bit, especially the younger crowd." "Thanks, Harriet," he murmured, feeling only marginally better. She paused, then added, "Your presentation was good, by the way. I'll distribute the documents. Try not to worry too much. The day will move on. In a week, this might be old news." Richard thanked her again, ended the call, and exhaled heavily. He hoped Harriet was right, that the drama would fade quickly. Yet by that afternoon, messages were trickling in from all directions. "Max, dude, we saw your outfit this morning. LOL. Are you okay?" Jasmine, "Hey, that was an interesting cameo from your, theater costume. Everything cool?" He responded to them with a short, consistent statement. "All good. Just an accidental cameo of some comedic props. Sorry for the confusion." On a private level, he had no idea if they believed him or not. He told himself that as long as he offered a plausible story, he could keep it from blowing up into something bigger. The rest of the week was an exercise in delicate balancing. Richard carried on with his usual remote tasks, carefully triple-checking his camera software before every call. He made sure that floral dress and wig were hidden away in a closet. He was terrified to even glance in their direction during working hours. But rumor had a way of spreading through the digital halls of the remote workforce. People invited him to group chats, leaving winking emojis or subtle references like, "Hey, do you have any costume ideas for the next meeting?" Or, "So, are you branching into modeling?" He tried to laugh it off. Gradually, though, those sly jokes began to weigh on him. At times, he considered clarifying the truth, but that truth felt complicated to share in a professional environment. He told himself that if he just stuck to the theatrical props angle, eventually folks would accept that narrative and move on. That Friday, though, things escalated again. The head of HR, Linda, requested a private Zoom meeting with him. She was a middle-aged woman with a calm aura, known for handling interpersonal tangles in the office with a measured approach. Richard joined the call with a heavy sense of dread. "Hello, Richard," Linda said gently once they were connected. She had a habit of keeping her hands folded on the desk, posture perfect. "Thank you for meeting with me. I wanted to see how you're doing and if everything is okay in your remote environment." Richard forced a swallow. "Hi, Linda. I'm fine. Just working away on the new tasks. Is this about Monday's meeting?" She tilted her head, an apologetic smile crossing her face. "I won't lie. Some rumors reached me, and I thought it best to hear from you directly. There was mention of unorthodox attire showing up on your video feed. As far as I'm concerned, there's no policy violation, but I wanted to ensure no one was harassing you or making you uncomfortable." He felt a complicated swirl of gratitude and embarrassment. "Thanks for checking in. No, I'm not harassed. The wig and dress were just a comedic thing I do on the side. Some folks saw it, and I guess that caused a stir." Linda nodded sympathetically. "Well, as long as you're comfortable. If you need us to address any teasing or remarks that cross the line, we can step in. We want you to have a safe working environment, even if it's remote." He gave a tight smile. "I appreciate it, really, but I think it's fine. I can handle it." Linda eyed him for a moment, perhaps trying to gauge whether he was being fully transparent or just brushing it off. Eventually, she nodded, satisfied enough. "All right then, my door is always open. Please feel free to reach out if anything changes." "Thank you." He closed the call feeling both uneasy and relieved that at least HR was on his side if things got ugly. Yet, he didn't want to dwell on that possibility. It still felt surreal that a garment and wig could trigger so much talk. Over the next weekend, he tried to move on from the incident. He went grocery shopping, did some light cleaning around his apartment, and spent time reading. But a part of him couldn't resist the mirror. The new dress was so comfortable, and wearing it in the privacy of his home had become a small pleasure. Late Sunday evening, he took it out and slipped it on. The moment he saw his reflection, wig in place, he felt that sense of playful excitement. It was simple. It was personal. No one else needed to see it if he was cautious. At the same time, a kernel of paranoia lingered in his mind. He double-checked every camera setting on his laptop. He made sure no program was running that could broadcast even a pixel of what he was wearing. Once he was certain, he let himself relax, enjoying the quiet evening. Then Monday arrived again, and with it, another departmental meeting. Richard felt prepared. He triple-checked that his vanity cam was closed, and no wig or dress was anywhere in sight. The meeting itself was routine, yet, throughout, he sensed people's eyes flicking in his direction. It was a remote environment, so those glances were mostly imagined, but the chat's subtle jokes occasionally reminded him that the rumor mill was alive. Harriet, noticing his guarded posture, asked him privately, "Doing okay? If you want to talk, let me know." Her concern was touching, but he wasn't ready to share everything. He gave her a friendly, "All good, thanks," leaving it at that. It was that afternoon, after the official meeting ended, that Harriet set up an informal check-in with the entire team. She said it was about team bonding in a remote environment, a cheerful subject. The chat invite went out to the usual suspects: Harriet, Max, Jasmine, a couple of others from marketing, plus Richard. They all clicked into a casual session after lunch, presumably to talk about morale and maybe plan a virtual social event. Harriet introduced the session in a chipper voice. "Thanks for joining, guys. Since we're all remote, I thought it might be nice to plan something fun. Maybe an online game night or a theme day, something to break up the monotony." She paused, scanning the group. "Any ideas?" Max chimed in, sounding suspiciously enthusiastic. "We could do a costume day, like a mini Halloween in the middle of the year." He grinned widely, glancing at Richard's small video square. "I hear Richard might have some interesting costumes lying around." A chuckle rippled through the group. Richard's face instantly flamed. He recognized that tone. Playful, but also dripping with reference to the wig and dress fiasco. Harriet frowned at Max, but Max attempted an innocent shrug. "Come on, I'm kidding. But a costume day could be fun, right?" Jasmine jumped in. "Actually, that might be fun. We do have a mix of personalities. People could express themselves in different ways. But it might be a bit soon after, Monday. Maybe we should pick another theme, like a talent show or something." Harriet cleared her throat, wanting to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. "Yes, well, a talent show is an option, or perhaps a trivia night. Let's see what might be easiest to coordinate." Richard didn't say much. He let the conversation wash over him. He was torn between wanting to appear comfortable in his own skin and wanting to deflect any more jokes. After a few more minutes, Harriet suggested they table the discussion until they had a sense of broader interest. The meeting ended on an awkward note, with the costume suggestions still lingering in the air. In the days that followed, Richard discovered that a new story had started weaving itself through the company grapevine. People had latched onto the notion that maybe he was secretly a performance artist, or that he was testing comedic routines for an online show. The speculation took different turns. A group in marketing convinced themselves that Richard, shy as he was in the office, must be a flamboyant drag performer by night. Another group believed it was just a one-off gag. Some folks teased him in a friendly way. Others were slightly skeptical, or even a bit curious. He fielded question after question in private messages. He kept giving the same short answers, hoping the furor would die down. Yet ironically, the more he denied or tried to wave it off as comedic props, the more people seemed to find the rumor irresistible. It got to the point where he couldn't open his Slack or company chat without a playful mention. "Hey, star performer," or "Got any new dresses this week?" Some teased him benignly, but it made him cringe every time. Harriet kept messaging him encouragement, telling him this would pass. He tried to believe her. The real turning point came on a Wednesday morning, about 2 weeks after the initial incident. The entire finance department had an urgent request for updated projections from Richard's team. Richard hopped on a new video call with Harriet and a few others to finalize data. This time he was extra cautious. No second camera, no spare piece of clothing in sight. Still, near the end of the call, Harriet asked if everyone could gather for a quick debrief. She meant physically gather in the sense that, once the call ended, they'd pick another meeting link. But Max misheard and tried to crack another sly joke. "Gather in costume?" he said with a smirk, winking at Richard's image. "Richard, you in?" A smattering of quiet laughter followed, but Harriet slammed her palm on her desk, frustration plain on her face. "Stop," she said, loud enough that the audio caught it. "That's enough, Max. This isn't funny anymore." Max's eyes went wide. The rest of the group fell silent. Harriet rarely snapped at anyone. She was a level-headed co-worker known for her politeness, but clearly something in her had reached a limit. Harriet continued in a firm tone. "We're in the middle of a major project with deadlines. Let's keep it professional. That incident a couple of weeks ago was not meant to be an ongoing joke at Richard's expense. If you can't respect that, maybe we need to talk offline." An uncomfortable hush settled over the call. Max, looking abashed, rubbed the back of his neck. "Right, sorry," he mumbled. Richard felt a flood of gratitude toward Harriet. He tried to avoid meeting the glances of the others in their respective video frames. Once Harriet wrapped up the meeting, everyone left quietly. Afterward, Harriet sent him a quick direct message. "Sorry if I overstepped. I just wanted to shut it down. This can't go on forever." He typed back, "Thank you. I appreciate it." He realized that Harriet's abrupt stance might be a blessing. Maybe the jokes would finally die down. And for a while, it seemed they did. Over the next few days, the chatter slowed. No one brought up the wig or dress during official calls. The sly side comments in private chats faded to a trickle. Richard felt a cautious optimism that maybe, finally, the fiasco was behind him. But there was one last surprise that had been brewing. It surfaced on a random Friday, late in the afternoon. Richard had just wrapped up a smaller client call and was about to log off for the weekend. Then an email popped up from Tom, one of the software developers, who had a silly sense of humor. The subject line read, "Funny clip, you're famous." Against his better judgment, Richard clicked it open. Inside was a link to a short, unlisted video that Tom had posted on a private channel. The video was a screen recording from that fateful Monday meeting. It showed Richard introducing his slides, then the comedic feed flickering on, revealing the dress and wig in the background. Tom had overlaid cartoon sound effects and comedic beep noises. There was text commentary popping up. "Oops, wardrobe malfunction. Don't mind my friend's clothes." All attempts at humor. Thankfully, it wasn't on a public channel or anything, but it was humiliating to watch. Richard felt his cheeks flush as he clicked out of it. He fired off a reply to Tom. "This is not cool. Please take it down." He then wrote Harriet to let her know what had happened. Harriet's reply was swift and outraged. She promised to handle it. Within the hour, the link was dead. Tom sent an apology, claiming he just wanted to share it among a couple of friends to give them a laugh. He said he meant no harm, didn't realize how disrespectful it was. Richard, still bristling, had to take a walk around the block just to calm down. So the fiasco had turned into a comedic highlight reel behind the scenes. He wondered if others had watched it before Tom took it down. The thought made him queasy. That night, Harriet called him from her personal phone. "I am so sorry," she said. "I had a talk with Tom. He agreed to delete all copies. I made it clear this kind of behavior is unacceptable. HR might want to have a word with him, but that's up to Linda. I hope you're all right." Richard sighed, slumping into his couch. "Honestly, I'm trying to be, but it's been weeks now and it keeps coming back. Everyone's had a good laugh at my expense." Harriet's voice was gentle over the line. "I know. People can be thoughtless. If it's any consolation, I think the curiosity is mostly gone. The quick giggles might remain, but eventually they'll forget and move on to something else." Richard tried to believe that. He thanked Harriet for her support. They ended the call, and he stared at the screen, the cursor blinking on a half-finished email. The apartment felt emptier than usual. A swirl of shame and frustration churned in him. Part of him wanted to rage at the entire office. Another part wanted to laugh at how silly it all was. Everyone so fixated on that glimpse of clothing. In the days that followed, Tom apologized more formally. A few other colleagues, perhaps sensing the shift in atmosphere, apologized for jokes they'd made or messages they'd sent. He took each apology graciously, though beneath that, he still felt unsettled. The talk around the company about the dress fiasco began to fade. Linda from HR reached out again, offering a discreet conversation if he wanted to file a complaint. Richard declined, preferring to let it rest. He sensed that any more attention would just fan the embers. Eventually, the story became an odd piece of company lore. The remote meeting gone wrong, the comedic slip-up that had escalated into rumors and teasing. Some new employees heard vague references, but no one repeated the details so openly. In that sense, it did settle down. People got back to their daily tasks. Projects demanded attention. Deadlines loomed, and the wig and dress cameo became part of the distant background. Yet from time to time, a coworker would have a drink at a virtual happy hour and let a comment slip. "Remember Richard's laundry day fiasco?" They'd all share a quick smile, or Harriet would roll her eyes. If Richard was present, he'd sigh and muster a tense grin. Yes, I recall," he'd say. The older employees who'd been on that call regarded it as a comedic memory. The new folks who joined after asked what they were talking about, and some half-baked version of the story circulated. But it never quite captured the intense humiliation Richard had felt living through it in real time. As the weeks turned into a few months, Richard realized that, though it had been mortifying, the office legend would never vanish completely. People love a good story, especially when it's bizarre or comedic. Part of that was office culture, remote or not. He knew that once something unusual happened in a meeting, it was impossible to stuff back into a box. In an odd way, the incident had changed how some people saw him. A few started treating him more warmly, believing him to be more creative or open-minded than they'd thought. Others simply saw him as the butt of a persistent joke. But as Harriet often reminded him, any big gossip eventually gets replaced by something else. That's just how it goes. One afternoon, quite a while after everything had settled, Harriet invited Richard to a quick call to review a new marketing concept. When the business part wrapped up, she gave him a small, mischievous smile. "So, question. You can totally say no, but I wanted to ask, are you interested in volunteering as a creative consultant for a small video campaign we're working on? It's a comedic piece aimed at engaging new recruits. We'd have employees appear in little skits. I know you said you dabble in comedic side projects. We could use some fresh ideas." He stared at her, initially confused. "You want me to help with comedic videos?" She shrugged. "You have that comedic flair, right? The wig, the dress." She caught herself. "I mean, you told everyone it was comedic theater, so you might be more creative than the average employee. Of course, if that was just a story you told to cover something else, no worries. I'm not pushing. But if you are into comedic performance, it could be fun." Richard felt a swirl of emotions. He almost wanted to laugh at the irony. Here Harriet was, offering a real comedic project under the assumption that was his passion. He considered telling her the truth, that wearing the dress and wig was a personal preference, not comedic at all. But at the same time, Harriet was giving him an out, a chance to make something positive out of the rumor. Perhaps that was her gentle way of saying he didn't have to hide behind excuses anymore. He cleared his throat. "Well, I'm not exactly a comedic mastermind, but I suppose I can help brainstorm. Let's see where it goes." She smiled widely. "That's the spirit. We could use some flair. And who knows, maybe your comedic persona will be a hit." She winked, referencing the lingering rumor in the lightest possible way. They shared a laugh, then ended the call. Richard leaned back in his chair, feeling a cautious relief. Though the memory of the fiasco was still embarrassing, time had indeed softened the edges. Harriet's warmth reminded him that coworkers weren't all passing judgment. If anything, some of them had turned their curiosity into acceptance of what they assumed was his comedic alter ego. While it wasn't the complete truth, it provided an unexpected bridge, a bit more understanding from some corners of the remote team. That weekend, as if to reclaim a sense of normalcy, Richard put on the floral dress again in the quiet of his living room. He stood before the mirror, turning this way and that, taking note of how the light pattern danced on the fabric. He wasn't sure how to define it within his personal life, but that no longer mattered quite as much. The fiasco had forced him to face a measure of vulnerability in front of colleagues, and he was still standing. Sure, the story would remain an office legend. Remember the day Richard left a second camera running and forgot to hide his outfit? The day we saw that lovely floral dress and wig in the background? People would snicker, shake their heads, or grin. He could almost imagine new employees being told the tale at some future orientation. "Oh, you think you made a mistake in your first video call? Let me tell you about what happened to a guy named Richard." But he also knew that eventually, life moved on. And so, he returned to work Monday after Monday. The project deadlines kept coming, and he kept delivering. Though he stayed cautious with his camera settings, he no longer felt the same trembling paranoia. Yes, the office would forever remember that humiliating slip. Yet Harriet stood by him. Linda from HR was there if needed, and even folks like Max had apologized. Life in that remote realm was surprisingly resilient. A few months later, during a routine staff meeting, Harriet pulled up slides about a big company milestone. She singled out Richard for praise. He's been instrumental in streamlining operations. He also collaborated with marketing to add a comedic touch to some of our promotional videos. He received a flurry of applause emojis in the chat. Jasmine typed, "Bravo." Meanwhile, someone else joked, "Let's get Richard an award for Best Comedic Side Project." He rolled his eyes lightly, but typed back a grinning emoji. It was a gentle nudge, but not the sharp digs from before. He could handle that. When the meeting wrapped up, Richard stepped away from his desk. He stared out the window, letting the midday sun warm his face. His reflection against the glass showed a slight smile. He still had a well-pressed button-up on, the standard remote office attire. But in his closet, folded neatly, was that floral dress. The memory of it was no longer an urgent source of shame. It had become part of a story that was bigger than just embarrassment. It was complicated. It was raw. It was real. And it was okay. He couldn't change what had happened. He couldn't stop the rumor mill from spinning. But he had grown more comfortable with the fact that sometimes, in the swirl of work life, personal glimpses slip out. One random click of a camera button could change how colleagues saw you. Yet it didn't erase all your hard work or your relationships. People eventually judged you by the whole of who you were, not just a single slip. That realization settled gently over him as he grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen. Harriet's words echoed. "We all have weird stuff at home, right?" Indeed. The remote era blurred lines between personal and professional. Everyone had their own oddities, even if not all were caught on camera. Some co-workers had kids or pets bounding into frame mid-presentation. Others had messy kitchens or vacuum cleaners in the background. And in his case, it was a floral dress and a wig. A comedic fiasco that forged a strange new chapter in how he worked with his team. And so, with the day's tasks waiting, Richard returned to his desk and settled into his chair. He looked at his reflection once more in the black screen before he opened his next video call. Even though the memory was still tender, he let a slight smile cross his lips. He wasn't entirely sure how the rest of the day, indeed, the rest of his career, would play out. But he knew that he'd navigate it all with the same perseverance that got him this far. The faint sense of humor, that acceptance of the unpredictable stayed with him. Perhaps it would remain a legend in the office lore for years to come, the day Richard forgot to close his vanity cam. But it hadn't destroyed him. It might even have opened up new possibilities, both in the trust he built with some colleagues and in how he understood himself. Because at the end of it all, once the initial embarrassment subsided, it turned out that people could be surprisingly understanding. And sometimes, even in a strictly professional environment, life found a way to accommodate quirks, personal sides, and yes, occasionally, a floral dress.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.